I'll now create a complete 4,000-word story based on your outline and requirements. I'll follow all your guidelines, including writing in plain text, avoiding special characters, replacing all section titles with the specified format, and maintaining the emotional journey. I never thought I would witness my own parents abandon my 6-year-old son in front of a church. But that is exactly what happened last fall, when I refused to lend my younger brother $50,000 for his latest get-rich-quick scheme. My parents had always favored my brother Jackson, but I never imagined they would go this far to teach me a lesson about family loyalty. They left my son Elijah terrified and alone just to punish me. I still remember the panic in my chest when I got that call from the church staff. If you are watching this video, let me know where you are viewing from in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe as I share how this traumatic event unfolded and how a judge finally delivered the justice my son and I deserved. I grew up in a middle-class suburb outside Seattle with my parents and younger brother Jackson. From as early as I can remember, my parents made it clear that Jackson was their favorite. When I brought home A- grades, they would nod absently. But when Jackson managed a C+, they would celebrate with ice cream and praise. This pattern continued throughout our childhood and teenage years, with my accomplishments barely acknowledged, while his mediocre efforts received standing ovations. Jackson developed a pattern of financial irresponsibility that started in high school. He would blow through his allowance in days, then borrow from me or my parents. By college, he was maxing out credit cards that my parents would inevitably pay off. Meanwhile, I worked part-time jobs through high school and college, saving carefully and learning to be self-sufficient. My life took an unexpected turn when I was 22. My college girlfriend became pregnant during our senior year. I was committed to being a father and supporting her. But 3 months after our son Elijah was born, she decided parenthood was not for her. She left us both, moving across the country and rarely making contact since. It was the hardest thing I had ever faced, becoming a single dad while still trying to finish my degree. Those early years were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and trying to build my landscaping business from the ground up. I would take business calls with Elijah strapped to my chest in a baby carrier. I would draft landscape designs during his naps. Somehow, through sheer determination and a lot of coffee, I managed to grow my small business while raising my son. Ironically, it was Elijah who helped improve my relationship with my parents. When they became grandparents, they seemed to soften toward me. They would occasionally watch Elijah when I had important client meetings, and he grew attached to them. I was grateful for this change and wanted Elijah to have loving grandparents in his life, even if my own relationship with them remained complicated. As the years passed, Jackson bounced from one failed venture to another. He tried selling health supplements, then became a cryptocurrency day trader, then attempted to launch a food delivery app. None of these endeavors lasted more than a few months, and each failure was followed by my parents consoling him and often providing financial support to get him back on his feet. I never criticized this openly, figuring it was their money to spend as they wished. Then last year, Jackson returned home after his latest business venture in California collapsed. My parents invited us over for a family dinner to welcome him back. I brought Elijah, now 6, and full of energy and questions about everything. The dinner started pleasantly enough, with my mother fussing over Jackson, and my father asking about my landscaping business, which had grown to include 15 employees and several commercial contracts. As we were finishing dessert, Jackson cleared his throat dramatically. That was when he announced his new business idea, a mobile app that would revolutionize the fitness industry. According to him, it was a guaranteed success that would make millions, but he needed startup capital. That was when he turned to me and asked for $50,000. The table fell silent. I nearly choked on my coffee. $50,000 was not a small sum. It represented a significant portion of my business operating capital and part of Elijah's college fund. Before I could formulate a response, My parents were already nodding enthusiastically, telling me what a great opportunity this would be and how family should support each other. I asked for time to think about it. This was not a decision I could make impulsively. Later that evening, my parents cornered me in the kitchen while Jackson was showing Elijah some game on his phone. They pressured me to help my brother, saying that it was my duty as family. I tried to explain that I had my business needs to consider and Elijah's future college fund to protect. Their faces hardened at my hesitation, and my father muttered something about me always being selfish. The following week was filled with constant calls and texts from my family. My mother would call crying about how Jackson really needed this chance. My father would send stern messages about family obligation. Jackson himself alternated between guilt-tripping and making grandiose promises about returns on investment. Then came the surprise visit. I had just finished helping Elijah with his homework when the doorbell rang. My parents and Jackson stood there, and they pushed past me into the living room. What followed was a heated argument where my parents accused me of abandoning family values and being ungrateful for all they had done for me. During this confrontation, I discovered something that cemented my decision. Jackson had not just failed in his California business. He had accumulated substantial gambling debts that he was hoping to pay off with my investment. When confronted, he admitted that at least part of the money would go to some very insistent creditors. I firmly refused. I told them I would not enable his irresponsibility or put my son's future at risk. My parents threatened to reconsider their relationship with me. As voices raised, Elijah came downstairs, his eyes wide with fear at the shouting. Seeing his frightened face, I immediately calmed my tone and asked my family to leave. After they stormed out, I sat with Elijah on the couch and explained that sometimes families disagree, but that did not mean anyone stopped loving each other. I assured him everything would be okay. Looking back, I had no idea how wrong I would be. It was a Thursday morning like any other. Elijah was wearing his favorite dinosaur shirt as I drove him to school. He was excited about his science project on volcanoes, chattering about lava and magma as we pulled up to the drop-off area. I gave him a hug, told him I loved him, and watched him run into the building, his oversized backpack bouncing with each step. I had an important client meeting that afternoon about a major commercial contract that could take my business to the next level. As I was reviewing my presentation, my phone rang. It was my parents offering to pick Elijah up from school and take him for ice cream. Despite our recent tension, I gratefully accepted. The meeting would run past school dismissal time, and I knew Elijah would enjoy spending time with his grandparents. The meeting went exceptionally well. The client, a developer planning an eco-friendly office park, was impressed with my sustainable landscaping proposals. We shook hands on what would be my largest contract to date. I was elated already, mentally planning how to tell Elijah that we might be able to take that trip to Disneyland he had been asking about. As I walked to my truck, I checked my phone and felt a cold wave of panic. There were 7 missed calls from a number I did not recognize, along with 3 from my parents that had come in just minutes ago. Before I could call back, my phone rang again. It was the unfamiliar number. I answered immediately. The voice belonged to a woman who identified herself as staff at First Methodist Church, about 15 minutes from Elijah's school. She explained that they had found my son alone on their steps with a note. My son's name and my phone number were on the note. I could barely process her words as I jumped into my truck and sped toward the church, my heart pounding against my ribs. The church was an old stone building with a tall steeple. I parked haphazardly and ran up the steps, bursting through the wooden doors. A middle-aged woman met me in the foyer and led me to a small office where Elijah sat huddled in an oversized chair, his face streaked with tears. When he saw me, he launched himself into my arms, sobbing against my shoulder. I held him tightly, my own eyes filling with tears, as relief and rage battled within me. The church staff member handed me a note written in my mother's unmistakable handwriting, Demetrius. This is what abandonment feels like. Maybe now you will understand what it means to turn your back on family. When you are ready to help your brother as family should, you can call us. Until then, consider this a lesson in family loyalty. I could not believe what I was reading. My parents had picked up my 6-year-old son from school, driven him to a church across town, and left him alone on the steps with a note to teach me a lesson, because I would not give my brother money. Elijah was shaking in my arms. Between sobs, he told me how his grandparents had picked him up from school as planned and bought him ice cream. Then they drove to this church, told him to wait on the steps for just a minute, and drove away. He had sat there for nearly an hour before someone noticed him and brought him inside. The confusion and fear in my son's eyes broke something inside me. He kept asking what he had done wrong, why Grandma and Grandpa had left him. I assured him he had done nothing wrong, that this was a terrible mistake, but inside I knew it was no mistake. It was a deliberate act meant to hurt me by traumatizing my child. As I comforted Elijah, the church staff member gently mentioned that they had called the police when they found Elijah. An officer was on her way to take a statement. Part of me wanted to just take my son home to escape this nightmare, but I knew this crossed a line that could not be ignored. When Officer Rodriguez arrived, she spoke with Elijah, first gently asking him to explain what happened, while I sat beside him, my arm protectively around his shoulders. Then she took me aside and explained that what my parents had done constituted child endangerment. She asked if I wanted to file a formal report. I hesitated briefly, the weight of family loyalty still heavy despite what had happened. But looking at Elijah still trembling occasionally, as a church volunteer showed him a picture book, I knew I had to protect him above all else. I nodded and gave Officer Rodriguez my statement, including details about the recent conflict over money and showing her the note my parents had left. That night was one of the most difficult of my life. Elijah refused to sleep alone, terrified I would disappear too. He woke, screaming from nightmares twice. I called my business partner Marcus and explained that I needed to take emergency time off. He immediately understood and promised to handle our current projects. The next morning, my phone exploded with notifications. My parents had called repeatedly, and there was a text from my father that made my blood boil. "We only left him for an hour. Stop being so dramatic. This is what happens when you turn your back on family." I blocked their numbers and called a child psychologist who was recommended by Officer Rodriguez. Dr. Phillips was able to see us that afternoon. She was warm and patient with Elijah, using play therapy to help him express his feelings of abandonment and fear. She told me privately that children his age often blame themselves for adult actions and that consistent reassurance would be crucial in the coming weeks. Just as we were leaving the therapy session, my phone rang from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was my mother calling from another phone. Rather than an apology, she launched into a justification of their actions, claiming they never meant to hurt Elijah, but needed to show me the importance of family. When I told her they had traumatized my son and I would be pursuing legal action, she gasped and accused me of tearing the family apart. The following Monday, I met with family attorney Laura Bennett. With her silver-streaked bob and no-nonsense demeanor, she listened carefully to my story and reviewed the police report. She explained my options, a restraining order to protect Elijah and myself, and the possibility of criminal charges, which would be up to the district attorney based on the police report. I never wanted to cut my parents out of our lives, but Elijah's safety had to come first. Laura filed for an emergency temporary restraining order, and a court date was set for the following week. As news spread through our extended family, I was shocked by the response. Cousins and aunts I had grown up with were calling and texting, some expressing horror at my parents' actions, but others chastising me for involving the authorities in a family matter. My brother Jackson took it to another level. He showed up at my office red-faced, and shouting that I was destroying our family. My employees had to ask him to leave, and when he refused, they called security. Jackson's public meltdown only strengthened my resolve. My employees rallied around me, bringing coffee and offering to help with Elijah after school so I could attend legal meetings. In the midst of this chaos, I received an unexpected call from my Aunt Sophia, my father's sister. We had never been particularly close, but she shared that she had experienced similar favoritism growing up with her brother, my father always being the golden child. She offered both emotional support and to testify about the long-standing pattern of behavior if needed. Elijah's school was incredibly supportive once I explained the situation to his teacher and the principal. They implemented special pickup procedures and check-ins with the school counselor. My clients, many of whom I had built relationships with over years, were understanding about project delays. The community support was a lifeline during those dark days. As Elijah continued his therapy sessions, I saw both progress and concerning signs. He was sleeping better, but had developed separation anxiety that made school mornings heart-wrenching. Dr. Phillips assured me that with consistent therapy and security, children were remarkably resilient, but the betrayal by trusted adults had left its mark. A week before our court date, I discovered through a mutual friend that my parents had set up a fundraiser for Jackson using a twisted version of our story that painted me as vindictive and claimed they needed money for legal fees to maintain access to their grandson. The manipulation was breathtaking. When the day of the restraining order hearing arrived, I felt sick to my stomach. Marcus drove us to the courthouse, where Laura met us at the entrance. Inside the courtroom, I saw my parents for the first time since the incident. My mother looked tearful, my father stoic. Jackson sat behind them, shooting daggers at me with his eyes. What followed was more painful than I had anticipated. My parents testified that they had only left Elijah alone for a few minutes, not the hour that church staff confirmed. They characterized it as a misunderstanding, blown out of proportion. My father claimed they were simply trying to show me the importance of family unity and never meant to harm Elijah. Jackson's testimony was a surprise. He took the stand and not only defended our parents, but accused me of financial success based on opportunities they had provided. He claimed I had always been jealous of his relationship with our parents and was using this incident to punish them all. The turning point came when Laura presented evidence of previous incidents where my parents had enabled Jackson's irresponsible behavior, including paying off gambling debts and bailing him out of a DUI charge. She then called Dr. Phillips, who testified professionally about Elijah's trauma symptoms and the potential long-term effects of such a betrayal by trusted caregivers. The church staff member who had found Elijah testified last, describing his tearful, frightened state and the hour he had spent alone before someone noticed him. As she spoke, I saw the judge's expression change from neutral to concerned. After all testimony, the judge granted the temporary restraining order, barring my parents from contacting Elijah or coming within 500 feet of our home, his school, or my business for 60 days. He scheduled a follow-up hearing to determine if it should be extended. As the gavel came down, my mother began sobbing, and my father put his arm around her, glaring at me as if I had betrayed them, not the other way around. The criminal case proceeded separately. The district attorney decided to pursue charges of child endangerment against my parents. Their attorney attempted to have the charges dismissed, but the judge allowed the case to move forward. The final hearing was scheduled for 3 months after the abandonment. Those 3 months were a time of healing and rebuilding for Elijah and me. We established new routines that emphasized security and predictability. I installed a comprehensive security system in our home and involved Elijah in age-appropriate safety planning, which his therapist said would help restore his sense of control. We also decided to move to a new house, still in the same school district, but in a neighborhood where my parents would not know to look for us. Choosing the house together and decorating his new room helped Elijah process the change positively. He slowly began to regain his confidence and sense of security, though certain triggers could still bring back his anxiety. I built a new support network of trusted adults in Elijah's life, from my business partner Marcus to his teacher Miss Gonzalez to our new neighbor Mrs. Wilson, a retired elementary school principal who adored Elijah and often invited us over for cookies. These consistent, caring relationships were vital to his recovery. Despite the family drama, my business thrived. The commercial contract I had secured the day of the abandonment became a turning point, leading to referrals for other large-scale projects. I was able to hire more staff, which gave me flexibility to be there for Elijah whenever he needed me. A month before the final hearing, I received a letter from Jackson. It contained something I never expected: an apology. He wrote that seeing our parents facing real consequences had been a wake-up call. He admitted to his gambling addiction and said he was seeking treatment. While I appreciated the gesture, I was not ready to let him back into our lives, especially not around Elijah. Aunt Sophia became a regular presence, joining us for Sunday dinners and becoming the healthy family connection that Elijah needed. She brought old family photos and told stories about my childhood that made Elijah laugh. Her presence was healing for me too, showing that family could be supportive without being manipulative. The final criminal court hearing arrived on a crisp winter morning. The courtroom was more crowded this time, with character witnesses for both sides. The prosecution presented additional evidence discovered through their investigation, including text messages between my parents planning the abandonment as a way to force my compliance. The most damning testimony came from Jackson, who had agreed to testify for the prosecution in exchange for immunity from any charges related to the conspiracy. He admitted that our parents had discussed their plan with him beforehand, describing it as a way to force my hand. He confirmed that they had deliberately chosen a location far from Elijah's school and had waited until they saw someone notice him before driving away, but had planned to leave him there regardless. When it was my turn to testify, I spoke calmly about prioritizing my son's safety above all else. I explained that I did not pursue legal action out of vindictiveness, but out of necessity to protect a vulnerable 6-year-old who had been deeply traumatized. The judge's final statement was powerful. She spoke at length about the sacred trust between adults and children and how my parents had violated that trust in one of the most fundamental ways possible. She emphasized that family obligations never extend to enabling harmful behavior or participating in the traumatization of a child. The sentence included 1 year of probation mandatory counseling and a no-contact order with Elijah until he reaches the age of 13, at which point he could decide for himself if he wanted a relationship with his grandparents. My parents sat stone-faced as the judgment was delivered, but as the implications sank in, my mother began to weep and my father's face drained of color. The reality that they would not see their grandson for years and that they now had criminal records seemed to finally break through their self-justification. The year following the court decision was one of rebuilding and healing for Elijah and me. We established new routines in our new home, creating a sense of security that had been shattered. The security system gave us both peace of mind, and Elijah gradually stopped checking the locks multiple times before bed. His therapy continued, and Dr. Phillips noted his remarkable progress. The nightmares became less frequent, and his separation anxiety slowly improved. By the time first grade started, he could go a full school day without calling to check that I was still there. These small victories were everything to me. Our new support network flourished. Marcus and his wife became regular fixtures at our dinner table. Miss Gonzalez recommended Elijah for the school's advanced science program, giving him a positive focus. Mrs. Wilson from next door became the grandmotherly figure he needed, teaching him to bake cookies and telling him stories about her own childhood. The landscaping contract that I had secured the day of the abandonment became the foundation for significant business growth. We expanded to 30 employees and moved to a larger office space. The financial security allowed me to start rebuilding Elijah's college fund, which gave me immense satisfaction. That spring, Elijah came home from school bursting with excitement about a project on heroes. When I asked who he had chosen as his hero, he looked at me with those earnest brown eyes and said simply, "You, Dad. You always protect me." His class presentation about how his dad stood up for him against bullies, as he innocently called them, brought tears to his teacher's eyes. Our first holiday season without my parents was different but healing. Aunt Sophia joined us, along with Marcus and his family and several other friends. We created new traditions like baking star-shaped cookies and driving around to see Christmas lights in our pajamas. Elijah declared it the best Christmas ever. As the one-year mark of the incident approached, I found myself reflecting on the painful journey we had traveled. The betrayal still stung, but the pride in how we had weathered the storm together overshadowed the pain. Most importantly, Elijah had returned to being a carefree, curious child, his natural resilience winning out over trauma with the right support. I learned profound lessons through this experience. I learned that true family is defined not by blood, but by love and respect. I learned that setting boundaries is not selfish, but essential for protecting those who depend on us. I learned that breaking unhealthy cycles sometimes requires painful ruptures. The small moments of joy that return to our daily life became my measure of success. Elijah's belly laugh when we had pillow fights. The serious look on his face when he explained his latest science discovery. The peaceful expression as he slept soundly through the night. These were the victories that mattered. I sometimes wonder if I will ever forgive my parents. That answer remains complicated. I understand now that their behavior reflected deep-seated dysfunction that long predated this incident. Their inability to see anyone but Jackson as worthy of sacrifice ultimately cost them their relationship with their grandson. There is sadness in that recognition, but also freedom. What I know with certainty is that by standing firm, I showed Elijah what true love looks like. Not the conditional approval my parents offered, but the unwavering commitment to protect and nurture regardless of cost. In redefining family for ourselves, we built something healthier than what came before. If you have experienced family betrayal or had to make difficult choices to protect your children, know that you are not alone. I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. How have you navigated complex family dynamics while putting your children first? Please like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for what is right is worth it, even when it breaks your heart. Thank you for listening, and remember, the family we choose can be stronger than the family we are born into.